Your favorite podcast has t-shirts now.
We've got two. One is Castlevania inspired and the other is Portal inspired.
There are a limited amount of them and they're really, really well done. Yeah. So you want to pick one up today if you haven't gotten yours yet.
ngppodcast.myshopify.com. Get yours while supplies last. Welcome to New Game Plus. This is a retro gaming podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one old game and then we talk about it. My name's Dustin.
My name is Kenny.
Nolan.
And this is Retro Recap 18.
Bagoosh. If you don't know what Retro Recap is, it is an episode that comes out every so often, about 20 to 25 episodes, where we have some friends of the show come on and lead the episode instead of us. So you get a break from us, but you also get a TLDR on the last 20-ish episodes.
Garna, Garlyle, and Slyn.
So close.
Just make them all G's.
Garlyle, Ghana, and Glenn?
Yep.
All right, there we go. It's our three friends that have been doing the last few retro recaps, have been doing exceptional with those, are returning for another retro recap. And this retro recap, this is what always shocks me, is that they feel like they are from forever ago.
I know.
When really they were just about 20 to 25 weeks ago.
I know. They feel like
That's
it's
a
been
long
a year
time.
or more. I'm like, I've never played that game.
So this list actually starts with Guitar Hero 3.
Yeah, that's
That
wild.
feels ages ago.
I was in Louisiana when we were about to record that.
I don't think that's true. It includes games like Suikoden 2.
I'd never played that in my life.
You have, and I played the entire thing.
I remember.
It was amazing.
Includes our entire summer pool party.
Of course it does. Yes, the Summer of Weird.
Summer of Weird.
Which will be so fun to hear their thoughts on some of those weird games.
It includes Simpsons skateboarding. That's one that honestly felt like eons ago.
No.
Yes.
You're looking at the wrong set of games. That was the last retro recap for sure.
Nolan, Demon's Souls is in here.
Yeah, that also feels a long time ago.
And then two really good games, Number Munchers and Mary-Kate and Ashley Sweet 16 License to Drive.
Honestly, this retro recap's going to be a really wild ride. It's going to be all over the place. So get ready.
Wild Ride, Sweet 16. Grab your keys, get in your Honda, and enjoy Retro Recap 18.
Welcome to New Game Plus Plus, a retro gaming podcast where three fans spent 23 weeks listening to one podcast where three guys spend 7 days playing one game, and then they talk about it, and then we talk about it. I'm not Dustin, I'm Garlyle.
I'm not Kenny, I'm Klenny.
And I'm not Nolan.
And this is Retro Recap 18. The guys filled you in already, but we're here to recap half a year worth of retro gaming shenanigans. Patreon pools, director's episode, a week of in-person recorded content, and of course the Summer of Weird. It's all here just in case you haven't been. But before we get to that, there's doubtless new listeners who don't know us. So let's take a moment, introduce ourselves, and answer this special question of the week. What game in NGP's catalog have you not played yet, but have been meaning to? Shawna, why don't you kick us off?
Awesome. Hi, I'm Shawna. You may know me from our Discord community. I've been a part of the community for, 4 or 5 years now. I don't even remember. And to answer the question, I'm pulling a normal Kenny move. I do have 3 answers because my list is quite long. But I'll save one. I'll say my top one. My top, I want to play this game, is Doshin the Giant. I still want to really play it.
And you should.
I should.
I suppose I'll go next. I'm Klen. If you've been around the Discord, you know, you probably know who I am. A game that I would play from the backlog. Was it Jazz Jackrabbit or no, Bucky O'Hare
Yeah.
was the NES title that they keep telling me that I need to play. So that's got to be my answer, but also Xenogears.
Oh.
I haven't gotten around to, and I definitely need to pick that one up at some point.
And I'm Garlyle. You've probably heard me in countless commentary sections on the episodes at this point. And my personal answer is, despite being like a big JRPG fan and everything, somehow I've never touched Terranigma, which the guys absolutely loved, and it made it sound great, and I've always heard it's one of the best on the system, and I just haven't, and I should fix that. But whatever games you think you want to get around to playing, and, you know, stop having in your backlog, you should come stop by the Discord and chat about it. We'll have the Question of the Week channel open, and you're welcome to talk about all the things that this show has made you want to play.
It will probably help your list grow longer as well.
Yeah, we do love long backlogs. And if I may make a suggestion, if you don't know what game to pick, Okage Shadow King is a great choice.
Oh, yeah. No bias here, but I did love that one.
I also loved that one, and knew nothing about it prior.
Nice.
So, also, before we kick off talking about the games, it's time for a bunch of stats.
Stats!
Yeah, everybody loves stats. So,
By Shane?
Stats by Shane!
but not by Shane, for once, actually.
Stat shot by Shane!
Here's some fun ones. The oldest game we'll be talking about today is the Tower of Druaga from 1984. I don't think any of us were born back then.
No.
Sure, I was totally not alive then. I was very alive.
Meanwhile, the newest title we'll be discussing is the just barely qualifying from 2009 Demon's Souls. So we got quite the stretch of time here. The most represented consoles we'll be talking about today, mostly the PlayStation 5, followed by the SNES and the PC, as you might expect. But here's a quick pop quiz for you. How many new consoles did we have in this batch? As in consoles where the games had never, launched on those systems prior to this.
I think 2? Do we have 2?
2 or 3? I know Satellaview is new this set too.
If we want to count the
Are we counting that?
Yeah, if we want to count the Satellaview, it's 3. But otherwise, we still had games premiering on the PSP and the PlayStation 3 for the first time in this batch.
Oh, that's right, the PSP, and that's just luck of the draw, because that's been eligible for,
as long as the
years
Nintendo
now.
DS, almost, and we've done plenty of games from there.
Yeah, I think that just kind of speaks to the catalog not being super big, right?
I think it's more so that people haven't really put them in pools. And there haven't been quite as many on the list.
Well, you guys
know
all
for
have
DS.
a chance to fix that.
Yeah, put all the PSP games on the list.
Every single one.
It's
No,
not
don't
big
do that.
enough.
Don't do that.
Yeah,
Don't do
Klen, you updated the Retro Master list recently. How big is it now?
We are just under 4,000 games that can be pulled currently.
And how many weeks of episodes is that?
Yes.
At least 3?
Okay.
Maybe even
So
4.
So stick around.
maybe 4.
One final fun stat about this is that this time around, of 20 eligible games to vote on, only 11 of them got, or 10 of them got NGP, but only one single host actually said yes 10 times. Only 3 of the games in this batch were unanimous New Game Plus games, and Dustin only gave his status 5 times in this entire season. This might be the stingiest batch we've had.
But also,
It would have been 4 if we had gotten more Kirby games.
But also, I don't think we had a lot of we didn't have a lot of RPGs or even JRPGs in this batch either, so that probably swings Dustin's vote quite a bit too.
I suppose that's true. All right. Let's not keep dragging on this farce, cut through the chatter in the games, and talk about our retro game of the week. Get it? Dragon Force, Through the Fire and the Flames.
Yep,
Guitar Hero.
I got it.
Yep.
Guitar Hero 3, Legends of Rock, is a 2007 console game with the iconic guitar peripherals, which I do have in the other room. I did not think to grab them beforehand. I guess I do have my guitar here, so that'll work.
That's an actual guitar that does not plug into the console. It does not work.
My actual guitar that does not plug into a PS2, unfortunately. Yeah, this was a really good episode. A director episode from Kentucky Kid. He was in most of the week, like, streaming playthrough of the game on Clone Hero. So it was really fun to sit in and, like, talk with him while he was on playing through songs.
Yeah, this was a week that had been long in planning. Kentucky Kid knew he wanted to bring this game, so he gave the crew like a bunch of heads up, and they all went out and actually found themselves guitar peripherals and everything, which apparently they are very difficult to find in this day and age at a reasonable price. So I don't think much of the community necessarily got to play along the intended way. I know I was stuck with a controller. That was not a great time.
Yeah.
I did think it was really funny because when that episode came out, the PDP Riffmaster was just beginning the rumors of, like, we're producing this guitar peripheral so you can play your Guitar Hero games. They thought that controller might have been marketed at like $70.
Yeah.
Uh-oh.
It's $130.
Oh my gosh.
So it is no easier to get a hold of a guitar than it was back then. At least not cheaper.
I was able to, if you guys are part of the Discord channel, probably like a month ago, I was able to actually find a Wii version of a Guitar Hero guitar at a secondhand store, and it's like pristine. Like, I think that whoever owned it literally used it one time. But yeah, they are so hard to find.
Yeah, all mine have disappeared amongst my moves and stuff. They're just gone with the wind. And that's a shame, because I kind of had the inkling to really break them out.
Yeah, it's hard. They're bulky and they're kind of big. So, you know, if you go through your gaming phases and, you know, to anyone who's young, who's like listening to this, don't get rid of your weird controllers, because you never know. 20 years from now, we're going to want to use them again. It's going to be a big deal. But yeah, I had original ones too, way back in the day, and I don't even know where mine are. They're gone too.
I did want to mention, in the commentary on that episode, community member Club mentioned that it was a perfectly timed episode because he'd been working on a full series retrospective about Guitar Hero. And I will tell you all at home, it turned out absolutely amazingly. It's on YouTube. I played and ranked every Guitar Hero game. It's like a good 2-hour video essay to watch on just the entire series. So if hearing about Guitar Hero instinctively got you amped up to just think and enjoy it more, go check that out.
That's awesome.
Yeah, really good video. Definitely check it out.
Next up was Toonstruck, the 1996 PC animated point-and-click adventure that kind of, what was the movie, Who Framed Roger Rabbit? Kind of melded, like, visual hand-drawn animation with real actors to create a very Looney Tunes logic game, but, like, I've got it in my notes here that apparently only mine and Kenny's brains actually can run on Looney Tunes logic, and Nolan and Dustin just short-circuit when faced with.
I vividly remember the phrase, what do you do when you have the mouse in your inventory, in your bag? And it didn't occur to me to interact with the elephant, but I understand why.
Yeah, that's like old logic.
Yeah, it is. It is old school cartoon logic, and I guess my brain just didn't quite click into that week.
That was kind of my feeling too about this game. Like, this game came out in like 1996, which I know was a long time ago, but I felt like it should have been an earlier game. Like, to me, it felt like, I don't know, like 1993. I know it's like, to me, it was just like drawing like an earlier time frame. Like in 1996, like there was far more sophisticated games or gaming at that time, and it just felt like such a gimmick that you would see like in earlier 90s games.
Kinda. I think like the scale of the game and like the amount of recorded footage and stuff that was used for it, that would not have worked much earlier than this. But like the toon aesthetic and like the style that it is aping is definitely older than 90s cartoons here.
Yeah. I mean, I definitely don't want to diminish like how kind of cool the idea was, and like how much like engineering went into, you know, having Christopher Lloyd and, you know, all these different positions and like voice recording and then putting it over a game. Like, that whole thing is very impressive. And maybe I just was like, I don't know who the audience is for this game either too, so I don't know. Like, the game was very confusing, but I did like seeing like Christopher Lloyd and Ben Stein in it.
I will say one of the things in that episode that I'm excited about is the guys were talking about the like humongous games for a bit at the end. They're like, I would really like to play like Spy Fox, Pajama Sam, all of those.
Putt-putt.
Putt-putt. So I'm really hoping one of those comes up at some point so we can get
you want
like
putt-putt in
that
here?
real nostalgia. We got putt-putt later. Just hold on.
Yeah, sometimes people like
That's
old
true.
edutainment games.
Yeah, I was kind of drawing like from nostalgia too from this. Like, for me, it was like pulling Sam and Max was a similar kind of, you know, game, and like Goofy, like cartoon Goofy as well. And so like that was where it was hitting me, in the remembering and the nostalgia of that. The next game we played was a 2001 PlayStation 2/Dreamcast title called Rez, which was a Patreon pool, if I remember correctly.
Yep. Put
And
in
it was
by
like
Ted.
and it was a music-based, like rhythm-esque kind of game. All I remember is that there was some inappropriate peripherals. Again, another weird controller that could go along with this, called a trance vibrator.
Yeah, the guys, it was pointed out a lot. I asked the community for a whole bunch of commentary and opinions, and there were a lot of people who were having a whole lot of fun of the guys trying to dance around the idea of, you know, just a vibrating pad that they gave you to go with the music.
Nope.
Mm-hmm.
Nope.
Yep.
Yep.
Listen, if you
Nope,
got
yep.
the unedited version of that, and this is one of the reasons you should be a producer, just saying, they just completely went off on this game in stuff that got cut out from the actual episode. They had such a time with this one.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, this game. So yeah, it's like a rhythm, like I have on my notes, it's like a rhythm rail shooter.
It's another tube shooter.
Yeah.
There was a lot of comparison to IS Internal Section.
Or
Yes.
Star Fox.
That's the name of that game. That too, kind of. It's unique, but not good. It was unanimously voted no NGP.
That's true.
So that tells you everything you need to know.
I mean,
Yeah, that's true.
I kind of like it, but it's definitely an acquired taste. It does... I gotta thank Kenny for teaching me the word quantizing in this episode. Of, like, it's one of the first games to really work on adjusting the pace of sound and locking sound effects to rhythm to actually have them, like, synchronize and enhance the music as opposed to just playing arbitrarily. Which, like, there's a whole bunch of games later, like Tetris Effect does an amazing job with the same thing, where it just all flows so together. And Rez is a little bit rough in comparison to those, but you can see, like, it was one of the pioneers for that.
Yeah. During the first play, Nolan did the first play. And I think at the end of this couple things, I was surprised, to hear how, because we all know how much Nolan loves music, right? And this did have like really high quality music. Like that was one of the things that it did have going for it. So I thought Nolan would actually like this game, but unfortunately it didn't work out. But Nolan also called out that it definitely has like Tron vibes to it, and like that for sure. It like totally looks like Tron. So like that part of it looked really cool.
Yeah, it's definitely one of, I was going to say one of the more unique games we covered this time around, but we got a lot of weird ones to talk about.
It's like a whole season of weird.
Weird.
Before the next one, before the next one, I just want to say also for our unedited episode listeners, there's a line in there where Kenny, I think, says something about Nintendo would never, and all I could think about was, don't tell him about Super Princess Peach, a game that literally ends on a vibrator joke.
Inappropriate.
It was.
She has a magic vibe scepter the entire game, which is like emotional vibes. But at the end, there's a joke about like, where's the vibe scepter? Maybe it's the reason your mom's smiling all the time. I'm not even kidding.
Don't let Kenny know that. Just let him stay pure.
The next weird game, well,
we haven't gotten there yet.
Super weird. The next normal game for now was Suikoden 2. Did I pronounce that right?
Close.
More or less.
Yeah.
Nice. It was a 1998 PlayStation title. Another JRPG. This one was a director episode with Justified. Thank you, Justified, for bringing this game to us. If there were like 2 or 3 games out of this batch that I do need to go back and play more of, this is for sure one of them. I just really didn't get much time to invest in it, and it was really good from the bit that I did get to play. Lots of gorgeous 2D assets and animation that like really, really holds up. A lot like Final Fantasy IX in our last batch. Mm-hmm. It just still looks so good.
Yeah, that was my notes too, is that it was really pretty and like the music's really good as well. And I just really love when we get a game that hasn't been introduced before and it actually hits and it's great.
Yeah, this may not be like the A-list RPG you immediately hear about, but ask JRPG fans of the PS1 era, and this is one of the big ones that you should play. I do kind of still owe it some more time. I was actually pretty invested in the story. It was genuinely really good. I just, like I mentioned in my commentary, I just don't enjoy playing it that much. There's something with PS1 RPGs where either their mechanics are super simple or their mechanics are so crazily out there that it's like, what is going on? Like, this is the polar opposite of Legend of Mana, where this is a story that has absolutely hooked me and nothing going on in a gameplay department. But I will say, it did definitely hook one of our hosts. I think it got brought up on an episode, but for anybody who is looking for an update, Dustin did actually continue and got, like, the perfect ending for recruiting every single character and stuff. So, he did definitely end up seeing that through.
That's awesome. That makes sense, too, because of the next game that we're going to talk about. Dustin was not very happy about it, so he probably had time.
He had plenty of time.
Yeah, I mean, I guess we can talk about the Simpsons skateboarding if we have to. On a list of, bad games that deserve to be recognized as bad games by the guys, this 2002 PS2 Let's Attempt to Pretend We're Making Tony Hawk did not successfully make a Tony Hawk game.
This was unanimously and unsurprisingly no NGP.
Yeah.
The game was borderline unplayable. Just, did not function at all. Completely unfun experience. But somehow, the randomizer gods made sure this somehow was still not the worst game in this set.
I tell you guys, we're being punished for the good summer pool party that we had last year. It's just the randomizer is not giving us this year. For this game to be couple things. I wanted to hear from an actual Simpsons fan because
apparently
maybe,
Dustin's never watched it.
Yeah, Dustin's never he knows of them, but thanks for bringing that up. Dustin did the first play on this, and if you don't watch any, I'm pretty sure I'm good saying this. If you don't watch any other first plays, go watch this one. He's just screaming at the screen. It's hilarious. But yeah, he didn't even know the characters' names. He was calling Marge, I forget what he called her, but he called Marge something else. I think he called Lisa something else, and
he called Marge 4 different things on the podcast episode.
Yeah, so he
the
doesn't
first
know.
play wasn't going to be any better.
But yeah, I want to hear.
It is a really good first play.
Yeah, it's a great first play. But yeah, I'd love to hear from an actual Simpsons fan. Not saying that Dustin's incorrect, and I'm not vouching for this game at all. But I'd love to hear what an actual Simpsons fan thinks of these Simpsons games, because I think for us who probably aren't mega Simpsons fans, or just kind of it's whatever, it's a cash grab, it's putting Tony Hawk wallpaper on The Simpsons and calling it a game. But I was really surprised how late this game came out in comparison to Tony Hawk. It just felt like Tony Hawk was a thing, and then they were oh yeah, Simpsons skateboarding is the idea.
Yeah, there's a couple games we're going to talk about which are oh, here's a licensed attempt at doing this thing that has been done for a few years now, but you get the feeling nobody actually on the development team had played those games, or they probably would have realized something was wrong with what they'd created. And yeah, this is one of them. And I did go looking for that exact thing, Shawna, because I was curious on that week. And yeah, no, it turns out even Simpsons fans think this is one of the worst Simpsons games. And that's not exactly a high bar to clear to be a good Simpsons game.
Yeah, I don't think so. And I have a quote actually from Dustin's first play, in the tone of screaming at the top of his voice. I think he even turned away from the microphone to do it. He yells out, "I hate Bart Simpson," and he's just screaming it.
I can't believe Dustin's really Principal Seymour.
It's fantastic.
Principal Skinner.
Same
I'm
difference.
a fake fan.
Seymour is the other. I'm not even a fan. I've just watched Steam Hams way too many times.
All right, so the next game we played is from one of my favorite consoles, the Nintendo 64. It is a 1997, I call it a puzzler, right? It's a puzzle game.
I don't know what other genre I would be in.
In Dustin's favorite game universe, Tetrisphere, where you basically have a sphere of Tetris shapes, and you're matching Tetris shapes in quotes, and you're matching as you do the Tetris, but instead of making lines, it's you're stacking them on top of each other to free a little alien guy that's in the middle of the sphere. I was very to me it felt very Dr. Robotnik freeing the animals from the robots kind of thing. That's what I was pulling.
Yeah,
it was interesting.
This is a hard one to explain without actually having a video to look at, because it doesn't seem like it would make any sense off of that. And I mean, I'm going to complain about it being called Tetrisphere when many of the pieces are actually made up of just 3 blocks, and that's not a tetramino.
Yeah.
Because tetraminos are 4. I'm going to be grumpy about this.
They're Triminos. It's fine.
Yeah, the only thing I really have in my notes on this is that unfortunately the guys actually seem to have, like, misunderstood one of the core mechanics with the shifting pieces. And they're actually supposed to be just, they match whatever piece you drop them right onto, and the guys just were waiting for it as a timing thing. And I don't know how much that necessarily impacted things, although this was one of the first games to get NGP in this thing, so they seem to like it anyway.
Yeah. I was surprised that it took 10 minutes for Dustin to mention that he doesn't like Tetris in this episode.
I thought it would be his segue, to be honest.
I did too.
I personally, I'm a huge Tetris fan. I was kind of surprised I didn't like this one. But it's so wildly different from Tetris. Like, if you're going into this expecting a Tetris game, you're gonna be really alienated. It is a fine enough puzzle game, I guess. Like, I'm not upset that it got NGP status. It just, I don't know. It was really weirdly complex, and I didn't really mesh with it very well myself.
Yeah, for a game that's all about just, like, putting together matching shapes and then dropping another matching shape next to them, it turns out when you have to do that really fast and start aiming for, like, high scores with chaining them together and stuff, that does actually get weirdly complicated.
Well, that, and on top of it, there's, I don't know, for me, it's like a depth perception thing too. It was really hard to see, like, where you're trying to put shapes and stuff.
Yeah, and you have to, like, line stuff up and move the pieces around underneath other pieces, and it's just kind of messy.
Mm-hmm.
But
this game was hard.
I mean, lots of people enjoyed it, so I'm not gonna yuck their yum.
There you go. One thing to mention, though, before we move on to the next game, had to actually do with the poll for the game that we're going to talk about here in a second. But Nolan rolled out the idea of maybe we do a re-roll on the randomizer.
It was an April Fool's poll, and the episode coming up next did come out on April Fool's, and the joke was on all of us.
And that joke was a 1998 video game called Vigilante 8 Second Offense. And it is offensive, and it is second.
So both those things are true.
It is also Vigilante 8. This, if you are not familiar, if you have not gone back through the NGP backlog and listened to, what is it, episode 22?
Something super, super early like that, yeah.
It is the very first guest episode on the podcast was with Dan 8Q, I believe was his name. And he brought Vigilante 8, and the guys hated on that game in front of our guest so badly.
I remember that. Oh, that was so bad.
Infamously, the fellas do not like vehicular combat games. So when this one came up and they heard the name, we already knew what we were in for. And it wasn't good. I mean, I like vehicular combat, and I thought this game was hot garbage. It just is so bad.
Okay, thank goodness, like, you're actually willing to say that as a fan of the genre, because after some of the games we've had on the podcast covering that genre, I've started to doubt if I ever liked it.
Okay, so I'm glad we're talking about this, because the guys have this just hot hatred for these types of games. I was really trying to think about it, and I did a lot of, like, going over the games that were vehicular games that we've played in the past, and, like, going back to how we felt, you know, during those times, you know, 1998. I have a theory that these car games were far more popular and well-loved back during that time, because I think a lot of people, specifically, like, around, like, my generation, like, you know, the millennial generation, like, that's around the time people are starting to get interested in cars, or, like, they're starting to drive, or their older siblings are starting to drive. And so like cars are very interesting, where like nowadays, like, I don't think that they even make car games really like anymore. And then unless you're Grand Theft Auto or Gran Turismo, like no one wants to hear about it.
I mean, now that you're saying it, like, yeah, there was back during like the late 90s, early 2000s, that was the whole like attitude era. So of course people driving around in cars blowing each other up sounded super cool. And now it's kind of like, okay, what else you got? And so like the only the only modern vehicular combat game I can think about is Rocket League.
Oh yeah.
Which is a cursed thought, and I'm really sorry that I had it.
I don't know about vehicular combat necessarily. I know Lego 2K Drive is pretty recent, and I've been wanting to play that pretty bad. But I don't know what level of like combat there is in that. But I know there's plenty of like vehicle games that are still extremely popular. Like Forza Horizon is extremely popular.
Oh yeah,
I think that like the racing games are.
Yeah.
But I think, like, I mean, I was almost kicked out of the community last year for bringing up Twisted Metal as something that we should play during a couch co-op. But, like, I think that those combat games, and like what Garlyle was saying was like, there's this attitude era. Like, I think there was a time and place for these games, and we've just, as a gaming community or society or whatever, like, we've just kind of moved past it.
So are we all agreed we need to bring back the early 2000s Edge?
Oh, yeah.
You know what?
More Tony Hawk Underground?
Yeah.
More Need for Speed Carbon?
Yeah. Well, I think, like, actually Kenny's first play on this, I think captured the whole thing pretty well, because, like, at first, if you watch it, he's, like, vibing with this game. He's having a good time. And I was like, oh, my gosh, we're actually going to like a Vigilante.
We're going to do it.
Yeah, we're going to do it. Yeah, we're going to have this, like, car combat game, and it's going to be great. And then as the game progresses, like, he's now having less and less fun. And then he's, like, you're, like, left at the end, like, did we have a good time? Like, I don't know. You're confused. So.
Well, it's only compounded by, like, and it's mentioned in the episode, but you just, like, you will win by doing nothing. Yeah. Like, you have an objective-based game mode where the objectives do not matter. Maybe you finished one of them, but you'll just, like, you'll win. It doesn't really, you don't have to do anything.
The match will just end at some point.
Yeah.
And it's not even on a timer. I don't know what caused it. Anytime it happened, I don't know why it ended.
You did enough.
It just did.
Anyway, saving us from that hell was a descent into a different kind of hell, with 2009's Demon Souls, the first game on the podcast to first see release on the PlayStation 3, a director's episode featuring Eddie of the Smashing Bricks Retro Gaming Podcast, somehow a Souls-like that Nolan had not played up to that point. He went out and bought a PS5 just for this episode to play the remake of it, y'all.
That's right.
He, like,
and so did Eddie.
Yeah, they were really excited for this one.
Well, Eddie was less excited. If you go back and listen to the episode, he was halfway through playing through on his PS3, and then his console died.
Oh, that's right.
So he had to go out and buy a PS5.
His console just needed to get
so he could play the game. His console lost all of its runes, or his souls or whatever.
Yeah.
Yeah, but
yeah,
the fame of
it was a really good game.
You go.
Okay, I'll go. Yeah, this was a very funny episode to listen to. Kenny very obviously was not into this type of game. Nothing was going to change that. So it was just kind of... It was funny to hear Kenny have the experience that a lot of people have with Dark Souls. It was hard, and I died, and I got frustrated, and I wanted to quit.
Aww.
Which, Poor Kenny.
Yeah.
But at least he did not get hiccups again, like in the Far Cry first play.
Well, so I really wanted to see Kenny do the first play on this for that reason. But Dustin did this one, and it was really like cool to see Dustin, like he was channeling Nolan, and he was really enjoying the experience, and like, you know, did really well. So it was cool to see Dustin do that, but I really wanted to see Kenny do the first play on this one.
Yeah, that would have been something. Souls-likes are the type of game where, like, they're a good example of how difficulty in games is often walking a thin line. And, like, when you beat a challenge in a game, there's the question of, did I actually have fun? Am I psyched up that I beat that? Or am I just glad it's over? And Souls is definitely one of those series that trips that line back and forth.
Yeah, if you were looking for a first Souls-like game, I don't think that this is the one that you want to go for. It was kind of mentioned in the episode itself, but it's not straightforward. It's got a lot of things going on, and it is pretty rough. So almost any of the other ones are a really good jumping on point, at least comparatively.
All right, so the next game we played was a 1984. I was very much alive then as well, so it's not the oldest game here. NES title, The Tower of Druaga, which was yet another miss for this one. This was one of those unanimous no's from the guys. Watching this, it looked like Fantasy Pac-Man.
You're not entirely wrong.
Yeah. It's a little closer to, like, classic Bomberman.
Okay, I can see that.
But yeah, it's not good. I'm not going to pretend it's good. Everything about the game just is kind of rough, and the game itself is, like, allergic to giving the players the information that they need to succeed.
Mm-hmm.
I do find it ironic that this game followed Demon's Souls in a way that it made that look easy and straightforward in comparison.
That's true.
Yeah, this game, I will say that I do actually think there's a lot I like about this game. I finished this game that week. Like, I actually sat down and played the whole thing, and I had a good time with it by the end, as crazy as that sounds. But I absolutely had a guide open next to me, and, like, there are things about this game, like, it's Miyamoto's mentioned it's one of his favorite games. And, like, yeah, you can see how this sort of evolves into, like, The Legend of Zelda and stuff. You can see where this influences the entire action RPG genre as one of the earliest titles in it. But you can also see the part where generations of games following this love their stupid, obscure secrets that you needed a game guide in order to find. And, like, there was almost as much really good influence in this game as there was bad influence for gaming for a long time.
Yeah, I think watching the first play on this one was Nolan, who is usually pretty good at, these types of games. Pretty sure he died the most out of any first play in the history of the show ever. I'm pretty sure that's a true stat. Don't look it up. But yeah, it was rough to watch him play it, and the whole game just looks like 1984. Like, that's what it looked like back then.
Our next game was Rondo of Swords, a 2008 Nintendo DS title. I know we were talking about it earlier. We have had some DS titles. This is not one of the good ones.
Yeah, ironically, connecting back to the game we just played, it was asked of me to point out the sassiest and most subversive transition we've had. Give you all the info you need, unlike Rondo of Swords.
Yeah, unfortunately, it didn't make a difference for me. Having all of the information didn't make this any better. I'll point it out again later on another game, but strategy is not my preferred genre by a long shot. And it is really, really bad that this game decided, you know what? Let's take the strategy elements and make you just run straight through into the front lines with every single character. The route maneuver system in this game is awful. It never should have existed. It's terrible and goes against everything that a strategy RPG should be aiming for.
Yeah, it's in this really weird space of, like, technically it makes positioning matter a whole ton. Because, like, if your opponents can run through multiple of your units in one go, that's going to be really bad for you. But also what it tends to result in is even once you do get a whole bunch of units and get stronger, you're kind of just moving this death ball of units around. And, like, just to force your opponent to stay on the edges of it. And, like, the patterns it results in aren't fun. The mechanics aren't fun. Like, I am a strategy fan, and like I said, not having the information at hand and having it, like, concealed and no way to preview damage numbers and stuff, that sucks in a strategy game because it means you don't know what's actually going to happen when you take action.
Yeah, that's one of the hardest things for these games is when, like, when you have to do the battle math, like they had talked about in the episode, that is not something that a player should have to do. It just makes it really rough to play. It takes too long, and there's way too many uncertainties to deal with, on top of what you already have with, like, what's the enemy I gonna do, where are they gonna move. Adding all of that on top of it is just... It's like putting homework in your video game, and it's not fun.
Yeah, I have that... we have Fire Emblem at home.
Yeah, kinda, yeah.
We do have Fire Emblem at home.
Atlas, it's interesting. Atlas published both this and Demon's Souls, which we just talked about. And, like, this was Atlas USA that published it. And they picked up a whole lot of random games that seemed like they'd be, like, knockoff, low-budget alternatives to Thing in this time period. That was what they did. And, like, yeah, some of them took off like Demon's Souls. And some of them didn't, like this one.
Yeah, this was just rough to just watch. Kenny did the first play on this one as well, and he's a strategy guy, you know, and I love strategy games as well. And when we pulled this and we talked about it being a strategy game, I was like, oh, cool, and it's a Nintendo DS, and I was like, oh, even better. And it just was so painful. It was so painful to watch him try to figure out the mechanics of this, and all of the information. It was like so TMI. It was just like, it wasn't fun. Like, it's like you guys said, it's not a fun game.
Yeah, I think the most painful thing is for Nolan to get a game in, like, his preferred genre that he's never heard of on a console that he loves.
Oh, yeah.
And then, like, for the game to be just so bad, like, he has no choice but to say this is terrible, it was a waste of my time. It kind of feels bad. Yeah. I kind of feel bad for him.
Our next title, as of the release timing of the episode, was named Kaijo Shojin Shubibiman Zero. But, if you were not aware, it's now officially Cyber Citizen Shockman Zero, the 1997 Super Famicom Satellaview game, which, unlike the state was when the episode was released, is actually officially available in English as of early July. Actually, just a few weeks after the episode aired, the game became available for purchase on Switch.
Wow.
Honestly, like, the NGP effect has never been stronger than it has been this year. Like, it is incredible. I think it was actually... was it during the Toonstruck episode? I believe they mentioned, like, GOG, when they have a game available, like, they'll give the guys keys, which is really cool.
That's so cool.
And is a really nice partnership. So huge shout-outs to GOG for that.
Yeah, I mean, it's...
Shockman Zero was not on GOG.
Yeah. Inevitably, like, old games like that people will go out and look for them. And so, like, hey, if you wanted to, it's like $5 or something to play this game. And honestly, for a little $5 game, it's not actually all that bad.
Yeah, and
yeah, I had a good time with this one for sure.
Yeah, and for context, it's what would you'd call it, like a platformer, like beat 'em up style.
Yeah, action
game.
Platformer. Not a Mega Man clone. Yep. I will fight everyone over this.
But I think that the most fascinating thing about this episode was talking about the satella view and how the mechanics of that worked. And this was, 1997. Yes, we had internet, but we definitely were probably mostly on like dial up and what was it, DSL? Was that what our internet was called back then? We weren't downloading video games and playing them. And like, remind me, like, how did this work, Garlyle? It was so cool to like listen to how this whole thing worked.
There was a whole like separate like cartridge that you put into a little modem, and it would download the game when broadcast at a specific time directly onto that cartridge, and then you would just play the cartridge. And it was literally like broadcast like a radio show, like what game was available for download at what time would actually rotate like a TV schedule or something. And sometimes there would be like radio shows that were meant to accompany specific games and stuff. It was really cool, although it did also result in like a lot of lost media stuff. Like some of those games are just gone. I think the only reason we have like an F-Zero spin-off that came out was that people painstakingly recreated like from old ancient footage, like backported the stages. The actual thing's just gone, and that's kind of unfortunate.
That's crazy. And another reason why we believe in physical media when you can do it. Alrighty, so the next game took us to the Sega Genesis in 1994, which was Beyond Oasis, which was basically Zelda meets Aladdin. And they called it a game. Like, literally, the guy's name is Prince Ali. And that's all I could think about the entire time was the song from Aladdin.
Unless his name was Thor, if you played the non-North America version.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Like, all the North American naming and stuff really suggests this, like, very Arabic-inspired setting and, like, mythology and stuff. But a lot of the rest of the game was actually very typically fantasy. Like, it kind of really threw me. But I did want to note, I pulled the community to find out, like, hey, what had people actually played along with us? And aside from a couple big titles that we'll get to at the very end of this list, this was actually the second most played along game. Probably because it was accessible via the Nintendo Switch Online. Maybe because it was just old Genesis games. And we don't actually get that many Genesis games on the podcast.
Was this one... this one wasn't a Patreon pool yet, was it?
No, it was not.
Weird. Yeah, I wonder why it was so played, because it wasn't that good. It was kind of painful to play, actually.
Yeah, it was a shame, too, because it has, like, all these intricate combat mechanics and stuff to it, and then it just kind of devolves into you mashing the button anyway. And, like, the dungeons just... It gives you that Zelda vibe, but it is definitely not nearly as complex. It's got Yuzo Koshiro, who I adore their music for like Etrian Odyssey and ActRaiser and Streets of Rage and stuff. Worst soundtrack I've heard from them. Like it was just.
It was very like epic.
It was a really grand soundtrack.
Yeah.
But it was really horribly held back by the Genesis sound card. In a way that was really unpleasant to hear. And that's not the only time we're going to hear that complaint about the Genesis. But it was really rough. The fighting game combos for the Magic System made what would have otherwise been a really, really cool, fun system super unmanageable and, like, really rough. And the way they locked you out based on, like, what you have around you. Like, is there fire? Is there water? Can you actually summon your magic? It's kind of beyond me that some of those decisions were made. And I think it was for the worst. Our next game was a 1986 Apple II game. We don't get those very often.
Speaking of games we don't get too often, or systems we don't get too often.
Seriously. The game was Number Munchers. If you grew up in the public school system in, like, the 90s, you probably have a pretty good idea of what this game is. You probably played it quite a bit in the computer lab.
And let me put this out there for perspective for those of you who played along or watched along and never had this experience. As a person who grew up in the public school system in the 80s and 90s, we looked forward to playing this game.
The game you've received a unanimous no NGP from all three of the guys.
Yeah, Dustin and Kenny sounded personally wounded when they gave it no, but they knew what they had to do. Like,
oh yeah, this was horrible. But when we had nothing, when it was primitive times.
Yeah, when it meant you got to play video games at school, it was like, okay, yes. I guess I'll take a math game. This game was like a generation of games prior to the ones I had access to when I was growing up. Like, I remember, like, an edutainment game about, like, going around taking photos in the Amazon rainforest and stuff. And I remember the Oregon Trail and Math Blasters and stuff.
And, like, Carmen Sandiego, don't forget her.
Yeah, exactly. Like, there's this whole generation of, like, games that frankly are not actually all that good, but which you still develop those nostalgic memories for.
Sure. I think that there was like a time where these games, like the Number Munchers, and the like similar, were more stacked in the edu side, whereas the later like 80s 90s games were more on the tainment side of edutainment.
Yeah. This was Kenny's first play, am I right?
Yes. And
it's a must watch. It is a must see. You have to watch this man try to do math.
It's so, like, math is hard. And Kenny, oh my gosh. And of course he died. Like,
third grade math is not hard.
Okay, but when some of us were taught prime numbers were a certain number.
Oh my god, okay. Yeah, the number of people who brought up the prime number debacle.
Is 1 a prime number? No, it's not.
Well, apparently some people think it is.
Well, some people are wrong.
Listen,
Dustin.
Prime numbers require that the number be divisible by 1 and itself. If it itself is already 1, it does not have 2 different factors. That is why it is not a prime number. Next up, as mentioned, we had a couple different systems that we got the first time here, and so we went to the PlayStation Portable for the first time on the podcast for Hot Shots Golf Open Tee, which I think was also the first golf game we've had on the podcast, unless I've missed something somewhere.
No, we've had golf games, right? The Sid
we
Meier,
had Sim Golf.
We had like Sim Golf, and there was.
It's the first game we've had where you play golf.
I mean, technically, you could play on your courses in Sim Golf, but it is the first game that we would traditionally think of as a golfing game, and not a game that incidentally includes golf. So yeah,
incidentally has golf.
And it won't be the last golf game that we've played on the podcast.
Such a weird chunk of games we have here.
Weird chunk.
Every
single person's golf. Open tee. Dustin didn't really care for this one. I think Kenny also didn't really get along with the visual style. Mm-hmm. It was very, like, Wii aesthetic.
Very chibi-fied.
Like, the round characters, which was fine, but it did get NGP, which I was happy with. Especially because this was the rare NGP game that, like, I got so into that it actively interfered with my job. Like, I had to have put over 20 hours into this game that week. It took over my life for a couple days.
You really got into it, dang.
I, like, every waking moment that I could, I wanted to play this game.
I remember, so, fun fact, I know that we're talking about PSP and some Shawna lore for all of us fans of the retro recaps. This is yet another console that I won because of a costume contest at my job at the time. So yet another one. But I remember when this game came out, like, it was very well loved by people. People were excited about this game. Like, people loved it. Like, so to hear Klen get so, immersed in it is not surprising to me.
Yes, and it wasn't just that it was a PSP game, but it was also a PSP launch title.
That's right.
So it was really important, like, for the PSP itself, rather than just, like, this is a PSP game. Which is why it's, like, it's really cheap. I think back on the episode they said, I think Dustin said it was $5 used, $8 brand new.
Yeah, when we've had some titles where the brand new in box is like over $1,000, that's actually kind of ridiculous.
I mean, we did play Super Mario Brothers, and that complete in, like, that new in box is what, like $1.2 million now? Is that right?
For certain specific cartridges of it, yeah.
For certain specific cartridges.
Does anyone want to give me their certain specific cartridge? I'd really appreciate it.
Would anyone like to give me their certain specific credit card number and the 3 numbers on the back?
Do not do this.
And the date.
Legally required to state, do not do this.
Do not do this.
Yeah,
don't do that.
Don't do it. But do it. The next game we played took us back again to the early 2000s. We should probably look at and see, like, our times of games, because I feel like 90s, early 2000s is where we spent most of our time this time. But 2002, GBA title entitled BattleBots Beyond the Battle Box, which I would think is in line with our most hated genre of games, vehicular combat, because it's robo vehicle combat, and I'm pretty sure this was the game that was based off of a show, BattleBots, and I'm pretty sure that one of my bosses was on that show way back when. Yeah.
Wow.
I mean, I know we found out. I know we found out
Well,
Nolan had been involved in a robotics contest, but I didn't think we had some connection in the community back to the actual show.
Yeah, well, when you work with a bunch of, like, aerospace engineers, they do a lot of stuff with robotics, and I remember him telling me a story that I think involved that show. And that, like, the interesting thing was that when you watch the show, there's, like, a lot of, like, intense music and all that, but when you're actually, like, doing it, it's actually really quiet in there, because it's just people, controlling their robots.
Yep. I will say, when this game got picked, I, like, unlocked memories of this show existing. I found it and watched an entire season of it in that week.
Oh, wow.
I did not play the game nearly that long. I think I put 25 minutes into the game and then put it down forever.
This was a good game to choose to put down forever.
Yeah.
Yeah. This was the worst game out of this batch. Pretty firmly.
Yeah. I think that games
I got really
Go ahead.
like I got really into BattleBots during this week. Like, watched the show. I started planning a BattleBot to build. I'm like, I love BattleBots, and I'm personally offended by Nolan, like, bad-mouthing it. One of the things I would want to bring up for this game, they talked about, like, BattleBots could be a good game. Like, they could do it. And they almost did, because there was a prototype GameCube game that, like, is accessible. You can find it pretty easily. And that one is actually pretty good. So I would recommend, if you were like, I want to play a good BattleBots game and not like this abhorrent piece of trash, I would say that one's worth checking out. It was good for at least twice as long as I played this game for.
Yeah, I think that was like my main note, that like I just don't think a game like this, any kind of game like this, does well on a handheld. Like, I feel like you need like a larger screen real estate to really enjoy the game experience.
I'm not sure it's impossible, but it definitely wasn't going to be done by like trying to like take photos of the machines and like scale them down onto a GBA screen, and like this was the community voted worst game that we got out of this batch. This isn't just Klen saying it isn't just me. Everybody thinks this one was really bad, and it was so bad they brought it out twice. They cover the whole story on the episode about how they barely bug fixed the game and tried to re-release it under a different name.
Oh, that's
and just,
right.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's shady.
That's illegal.
Yeah, right? That's lying. Well, during this episode, Nolan denounces the person who added this game to the Retro Master list, and then made the claim that Number Crunchers was more fun.
He's not wrong.
He's not wrong.
Oh my gosh, guys, are you ready to get your flippy floppies on?
I sure am. It's time for the summer pool party. Woo!
Yay!
Yeah, to save us from a whole bunch of bad games, it was time for the annual summer pool party.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, every other week was a pool party entry. But, last year for the summer pool party, we had a whole bunch of really big name beloved games. We had Pikmin, I think we had Super Mario Bros, we had Soul Calibur 2. Like, people were really going off. And then something went weird in this one when Enrique Gomez started us off with the 1995 Genesis game that, by the way, apparently he'd never actually played before. He put it in the pool party as an excuse to play it. Light Crusader. Which was a really weird treasure-based, treasure-made, like the company behind Gunstar Heroes and Ikaruga and stuff, Western medieval style fantasy isometric action game. And it was weird.
I'm gonna stop saying, whenever we get these weird, not great treasure games, I'm gonna stop saying, oh, but we like treasure, because I feel like I'm always in that position where I'm like, oh, we like treasure, but then it's like not.
No. We don't like treasure.
We don't like treasure.
Treasure sometimes has some gold hidden away. But, I don't know. I don't know, man.
I mean, in this case, I really liked it. Some of the stuff that was done on this, on like a programming front, because there's fully 3D objects in this game that you'll straight up push on bars and they will rotate in real space as though they are being rendered in 3D. And there's a whole bunch of stuff like that had me just like, wait, you cannot do that smoothly on a Genesis. The hardware should not have been capable of doing this, and they did it. Should they have done it might be another question entirely, but they did.
Our next randomly selected game during the summer pool party era was at the start of our annual couch co-op event. The guys had gotten together in order to play a game, so people were really hoping to get a multiplayer game so the guys could play it together, and we did accomplish that, technically. We got the multiplayer party game for 2002 consoles, GameCube, PS2. And that game was Mary-Kate and Ashley Sweet 16 License to Drive.
Party is a very strong word for that video game.
Game is also a strong word for this.
So this game, if you're not familiar with Magical Mystery Mall, please listen to that episode, then listen to this episode. I don't think I need to tell you anything about this game, and I think you could probably guess where the guys landed on it. They did not give it NGP.
Surprise.
Don't act surprised.
3 adult men bouncing off a game aimed with the most, like, oh yeah, obviously relatable, how do you do fellow kids towards, like, teenage girls from the early 2000s?
I wouldn't even say teenage, like, tween. We're talking, like, I don't know, 10-year-olds.
She's so thin.
Oh god, yeah, all the talk about how bad some of that music has aged, which, so yeah.
Bad. Well, and even
really
just
bad.
Like the dialogue in the game itself was just so, I would not want my 10-year-old daughter looking up to 16-year-olds like that. Like the way that they're, I don't know. I would hope for a more like intelligent game for young people.
I think my favorite part of this game being pulled is that it is somehow, shockingly, this is not the first game we have played where a legal controversy comes up almost prior to the game's Wikipedia article.
Yep.
Because Acclaim did such a bad job and, like, not paying royalties to the twins that, like, there was a lawsuit over this game, and it ended the Mary-Kate and Ashley video game franchise.
Thank
completely. But we also had Uniracers. Was that last year, I believe?
Sometime.
I think that was last summer.
Which was sued by Disney for similar kinds of copyright issues. Totally unfounded. If you haven't listened to that episode, go listen to that episode too. Great episode.
Mm-hmm, it is a great episode. I know when we get these games that are very specific to a specific audience, that's usually not the collective us or the guys, it's really easy to look at the game and say, oh, this is a bad game, right? Because, like, none of us are typically going to be into a Mary-Kate and Ashley game legitimately. So looking at it with, like, unbiased eyes as much as I could, like, the game itself just does not seem very fun. It seems very slow. It's almost like, I felt like they made this game in, like, the context of, I have a bunch of kids at my house. I'm going to throw a video game in front of them. I need it to be as slow as possible to hold their attention for as long as possible so that I can, like, focus or think.
Yeah, if the Simpsons skateboarding was, we heard what Tony Hawk was and just tried to make that without ever playing it, this was Mario Party by people who had never actually played Mario Party, or else I think they would have realized very quickly what made their game unfun. Because it could have been all right. You'd speed up most of the mini games, you cut down the length of them by half, you speed up the board, you actually add some sound effects to things. It's a decent formula. They just blew it.
The next thing that we did in the middle of the summer pool party is our annual couch co-op, where the guys get together and touch knees to go do a bunch of, like, awesome live streams. A lot of community events are had. It's a huge time for all of us to get together and just interact. And so, yeah, Dustin made it all the way down to Texas, set up in, I believe, Kenny's house. And,
yep.
They recorded. We did a whole bunch of games. Like, I think Hades was my favorite, watching, all of them go through Hades. And, what's that puzzle game that they always play? The
Keep Talking and Nobody Explodes was there. Yeah.
That's the one. We realized that that's a baby game. It's so easy.
I could not believe how angry I was watching Kenny try to do Morse code.
Oh my gosh.
During that stream.
He was so good last year. I don't understand what happened.
I was getting so frustrated. Like, I was... I could almost not handle it. The amount of times he needed to, like, go over it. And it's not just his fault. Like, it was Dustin's fault, too. Don't get me wrong. Or Nolan's fault, or whatever. It was everyone's fault.
Yep.
But they did make it through. They disarmed one bomb, which was fantastic. But yeah, Couch Co-op was amazing. We had a little Patreon event, getting to share some hot takes on video games, which was very fun to hear. Get some shade thrown around a little bit.
Yeah, and another big one was the Retro Gaming Challenges stream, where the guys set up challenges for each other. The stream was a bit of a mess, but like in a really funny way. Like, not just for the technical oddity of only one of the sound channels coming in from the video games, which made them all sound very interesting, but also the fun of just like Nolan getting challenged to not grab grab as few coins as possible in Super Mario World, and grabbing the literal first possible coin he could, just automatically. Or like Kenny being like, okay, you guys are going to play Portal, and then pulling out a guitar controller for them.
And then having them proceed to not struggle with it at all.
Yeah.
Well, outside of the patron event, all of those should be available on YouTube if you want to go check them out. So make sure that you do that.
Yeah, you'll find them not on the videos tab, but on the live feeds tab from NGP, the live recording.
We are back to the Patreon pool. Welcome back to the water, everybody.
Ooh, splashy, splashy.
The Summer of Weird definitely continues with a 2005 Capcom 5 GameCube game, which also released on the PS2 and is available on PC now, if you want to go pick it up. Killer 7. This is a very unique title, which was actually pushed for on the 8th year anniversary stream. If you had listened to that recently, we did finally pull it in a Patreon pool, and it did get NGP, although not from Kenny, because he's a stick in the mud.
It's probably had something to do with the thick blood and the thin blood.
He couldn't get on board with all the blood. And I suppose neither did I, but I need to come back and give it another shot, because I felt the same way about Resident Evil 4 that I did about this one, and given a little more time, I did get into it. So this one is certainly... I can't even, like, attempt to describe this game in the time that we have to do so. It's one of the firmest entries possible for the Summer of Weird. Very, very good choice for that. And yeah, I mostly look forward to giving it some more time.
Yeah, this is like a weird, like, art house style, like, it's kind of a third person shooter, but also kind of on rails, but also kind of a point and click adventure, because that was sort of what the company had done before, and they wanted to start injecting more action into their, like, hyper political, hyper abstracted narratives. And this game is a taste, but if you can get a taste for it, there isn't another game quite like this one.
Yeah.
I think I just realized what Killer 7 is, though. It's No More Heroes meets Metal Gear Solid.
It is the same team that would go on to make No More Heroes, yeah.
There you go. Yeah, this game definitely has a very specific feel to it, and I can't remember off the top of my head what Kenny had mentioned, but he was listing off a bunch of movies as well that went along with this game. I definitely get, like, V for Vendetta, like, feels from this, and, you know, I don't know, 2005 for me, like, had a lot of this, like, political kind of angsty stuff happening. So this to me fit right into that time period when it came out. I felt like there was a lot of media that was coming out that kind of had these undertones, had this kind of like look to them. There was a lot of movies that came out that were experimenting with kind of cell shading and things like that.
Going for something a bit more classical and a lot more retro, though, we come back to Bionic Commando. Well, Bionic Commando Elite Forces, the 1999 Game Boy Color sequel that I wasn't ever aware was a thing. But, I mean, so first off, I want to mention the first game in the series was played over 300 episodes before this, a 6-year difference. Like, that's not quite as big as the one between the Vigilante 8 and its successor, but we're still hitting some old episodes, and, just saying, maybe hint, hint, maybe we'll see some return to some other old games soon. But
wouldn't that be nice?
Yeah. But for the time being, Bionic Commando, this one's kind of interesting. It was my first time actually playing a genuine Bionic Commando game, even though I'd always heard, like, oh yeah, the first one's like one of the sleeper hits of the NES that I should go back and play at some point. And honestly, I think like just the bigger screen resolution and stuff probably would have made it a little bit better of an experience than this for me, although I still kind of respect this one.
I was surprised with how good it looked for Game Boy Color.
The sprite animation and stuff was really fluid. Didn't necessarily like a lot of the background details, though.
Yeah, I still had some issues with just the view distance was pretty small, and that's just a product of, these early handhelds. I've had that issue with a few games, and it's not a huge issue here, but I just feel like it would be really nice to see just a little further, maybe just in the direction I'm looking, because it just kind of felt like I was really struggling to see where I was headed. But it's relatively minor. The game is still really good. It's very playable. Robotic arm, as proven by Metal Gear Solid Revengeance, proven, very cool, very fun thing to have robotic arms.
All right, another game that had some controversy in its history was the next game that we played, which was a 1991 NES title called Power Blade. This game was I wouldn't call it a lawsuit, but there was definitely some legal stuff involved because of the cover art claiming that they had stolen the likeness of Arnold Schwarzenegger, specifically for those of you who haven't seen it, the look of the Terminator. But it turned out that the game's artist developer literally made it after his own likeness, and he apparently just looks like the Terminator.
Yeah, when you see that cover art and stuff,
it's crazy.
Yeah, I mean, I guess somebody who does art could look like that, but that wouldn't be what I'd first guess they're doing.
Nope.
I'm looking at the cover art in my PowerPoint notes right now, and like, anytime Arnold Schwarzenegger is mentioned, it's like, it's right there. Because it is uncanny. It's actually uncanny.
Like, literally is the same.
The game is good, though. Just going back to the game, like, as a product.
Yeah. This did get New Game Plus.
It did get unanimous NGP. One of the very, very few games in the set to do so. I would say it's a lot like Shockman Zero. Just like a really solid platformer without like a ton of weird excess stuff going on. It's a nice game to just sit down and play through.
I believe that this is a Taito title as well.
I believe so, yep.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, not an A-list company, but a decently respectable B-list group.
Yeah, and we've played some of their titles before as well. A fun thing, just as an aside about this specific episode, and I know we don't always talk a lot about the question of the weeks and how they come up, and there's like amazing questions that are asked every single week. But this question of the week, there was kind of an upset because a lot of the times Dustin uses the questions of the week as his segue point into the episode. But unfortunately, his joke was stolen in this episode. And
That's right.
And he couldn't do his segue that he had planned out.
The next game was Plock. 1993 Super Nintendo platformer. It's about a little ball of energy, little dude with a hood, detachable arms and legs,
and a chip on his shoulder.
He's kind of a chill dude. He likes flags.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what else to say about Plock. I mean, it's a weird.
Listen,
back to the Summer of Weird.
Summer of Weird for sure.
Oh yeah, this was the randomizer giving us a very weird game.
Yeah,
I love the randomizer.
We do. Please be nicer to us. My note for this game was that it's cute and ugly all at the same time.
Not wrong.
Not wrong. And there was some nostalgia being pulled. I think from Nolan. Like there was talk of things that this game like reminded him of, and for me, looking at it, the parts of it were kind of like we were talking about how it's similar to like Kirby, where like, you know, Kirby like takes the weapons and stuff from its enemies. But for me, it felt a little bit closer to like Kid Chameleon, where you would like, you know, get different outfits and have these different abilities based off of that. But yeah, there was like lots of unfair mechanics with this game as well. The health bar was just abysmal and not kind. Exploring wasn't fun at all. And it just was not a super good experience. And one of the things that the guys even brought up was that it just felt like when they were developing this game, people were like, well, what about this? And what about this? And what about this? And they just kept adding things. So you had like this feature creep kind of thing coming into the game where no idea was a bad idea and they were all added in.
The funny thing is I don't even think a lot of this game necessarily should be bad. Like they mentioned, it's got some phenomenal music in it that is doing some actually crazy wizardry with the SNES sound chip, like to produce that level of quality. It's got its own really unique and like honestly kind of really fun art style that is very personality driven cartoon. It's got a whole bunch of little details in that regard. It's got a whole bunch of evolving gameplay and like different ways that the game plays out. And they forgot that level design is really important in a platformer, because the level design is just awful in this game to a point where it drags the entire thing back down.
Yeah. Back to the music. The Fallen Brothers, that was them, right?
Yeah.
They are phenomenal. They did music for games like Pictionary.
What?
If you haven't listened to some of their video game soundtrack stuff, it is just like, it is mind-blowing. Like, some of the best stuff that exists on, especially the Super Nintendo. Believe it or not, when we have games like Chrono Trigger and Final Fantasy VI, like, personally, I would say they blow those games out of the water.
Yeah, depending on the style you like. They are some of the best video game composers you've never heard of because all the games they composed for were garbage.
Aww.
They were so bad.
Poor buddies.
Speaking of games that are fun, despite the fact that they can be fairly difficult sometimes, and despite everything Dustin may have to say on the matter, the 1994 SNES title Kirby's Dream Course was the last main Patreon pool, and it took 8 of us banding together in order to get this game pulled. After, like, many of us on and off have been trying to get this game pulled for years now. I love this game. I love this game. I love this game. I don't care what Dustin says. This is a Kirby podcast. Drink the Kool-Aid, Dustin. Klen has a small Kirby amiibo right with him.
I don't know why you guys like this little pink psychopath, but I guess.
Where's the kick Shawna button?
At this rate, Klen will be doing the podcast on his own.
Okay, basically, Kirby is like Dark Souls.
I mean, listen, if we're going to talk difficulty, I genuinely think that trying to gold medal this game without like outside help and save states and stuff is one of the hardest challenges on the system. Like, unironically, this game has an extremely high like knowledge and skill cap to it, which feels weird for Kirby, which is usually a series where the skill like floor to play is incredibly low. No, this one's really difficult, but it's all in service of this really unique spin on golf that I adore.
See, the thing, like, I remember this title at the video rental store. I didn't have an SNES growing up. I had a Genesis, so I kind of missed the bus on a lot of these characters, and it's probably why I'm not very, like, close to them. And I remember seeing the cover art for this. I had no idea it was a golf game until now. Like, until, we played it.
Yeah, it's really unique, and it has a lot going on mechanically. Like, more than most golf games. Because the amount of ways that you can adjust your shot is, like, admirable. Even when you're considering, like, PGA Tour 2024, like, this year's golf game. Kirby Dream Course goes into significant detail on how much control you can have over your shot, which is insane for 1994 on a 2D plane.
Yeah, the big one in this game is that you have so much control over your shot once it's in the air. Like most golf games, you hit that ball and that's it. You just sit back and watch. And in Dream Course, that's not the case. That you will not get your hole as in one in this game by doing that. But, like, I don't know. I think Hal has an amazing skill with golf games. It was mentioned on the podcast that they also were responsible for NES golf back in the day. But it has to be noted, that was, like, the first golf game. Like, especially in the way that we think about modern golf games of, like, power gauges and, like, the third person down the fairway. Like, they invented that style for video games. And then they came up with this completely weird spin-off just years later. They're really good at their job, is what I'm saying.
All right, speaking of impressive, I think we're about to talk about our last game of our list, right?
Yep.
Well, the last game that we played in this series of games was from 2003, another GBA title. This one has been, I know, on our lists for a very long time to bring in. Advance Wars 2 Black Hole Rising, which unsurprisingly got NGP from the guys. And I can't remember if I played the first one or if I played the second one, but I have had experiences in the past with Advance Wars, and I normally don't like games like this, but Advance Wars I do like quite a bit. So I'm really happy that we finally were able to pull this game to play.
Yeah, this was not pulled as part of the pool party. This was the randomizer showing up with a game that has been in the Patreon pools time and time again for years. Just out of the blue. Yep. This was probably the biggest name that we actually pulled in this entire set, outside of like maybe Guitar Hero. And the randomizer just handed it to us.
She felt bad for us.
And yeah, I've always been fond of Advance Wars 2. Like, a lot of strategy games I actually sort of bounce off of. Not so much strategy RPGs, I love those, but just pure strategy games. But, like, there's something between Advance Wars' like, charm and its characters and its music that's fun. But then also the fact that, like, instead of having all these different factions that play completely differently and you have to memorize all their different armies and stuff, Advance Wars has everybody using the same pieces, but just like accentuating different strengths and weaknesses and strategies. And I just really click really well with that.
Yeah, like look at the contrast like between Advance Wars 2, where it unanimously got yes. Again, that was very rare for this set of games. And then compare it to like Rondo Swords, where like, you know, Kenny had to play that. And Kenny did the first play for this too. He did the first play for both of these similar games. And that was not a fun experience. But it just goes to show you that you can have like very similar games and you can do it really, really, really well, or you can do it not so well.
Yep. I also, like mentioned before, I'm not big on the strategy games either. I did have more fun with this than I typically do. It still wasn't quite enough to get me to like fall in love with it. But it was a lot more accessible. And like I realized thinking about it today, actually, it's like the simplicity of the units is a really, really big part of that. Because like in Fire Emblem, every single unit is its own unique like character. You have to know, you have to understand how far they can move, what attacks they have, what items they have. Whereas here it's like, it's an infantryman. They can move this far, and you can look at the map and you're like, you have all the information you need, which makes it way easier for a newcomer to come in and experience and find some level of success with it.
Yeah. Something that was brought up towards the end of the episode was about the idea of like, oh, there must be fan communities still talking about this today. I wanted to specifically bring up, for the people who might be at home and not aware of this, Advance Wars by Web, which has been a website that has existed basically since like Advance Wars 2 and like Advance Wars DS, which is literally an in-browser playable version of Advance Wars online. Like you can do like play by email, play by people over months if you want, or sit down and play a live game. You can have like up to 16 people playing at once. It's excellent. It's been around for a long time. Any Advance Wars fans out there who have not heard of this should give it a look. And that will wrap up our journey down memory lane with the Retro Recap number 18. Now, that doesn't mean we're necessarily done with the discussion, because I got a couple last questions. The first of which is, what's the favorite game you got to play along with the podcast this time? Let's start with Klen.
Oh boy. My favorite game that I got to play along has to go to Guitar Hero. I was able to go get a guitar, hook it up, and play it. My neighbors actually, like, the weeks following, had set up Rock Band in their garage, and we had played, like, full Rock Band together, like, with my neighbors in their garage.
That's
so
amazing.
I haven't gotten to play
Rock
Band in
It was really
so
fun.
long.
Yeah, it was really fun just to, like, get the band together and do some of that, too. Like, completely unrelated to the podcast, having that come up naturally was really fun. Yeah.
Personally, my favorite, and this is going to be a weird one, was the Tower of Druaga. I can't explain it either. Years ago, when I first tried that game, I hated it. But something in the amount of information I had going in this time or something, I just clicked with it in a way that I haven't in a while. And, like, especially for a game that old, it was genuinely surprising to me how much I liked it.
That's awesome. My favorite game also was Guitar Hero, and I think it's just such a fun interactive game, and you know the music's good, and it's just like fun to sit there and rock out and play some good songs and just have a good time.
That's all good.
What was your favorite song, though?
I liked I don't know what it was called. It was like on the first set list. It was like the last song on the first set list. The Life Goes By So Fast song. Like, I feel like I'm good at it, so I like playing that one.
Yeah. Mine's always been Mississippi Queen.
That's a good one, too.
Mississippi Queen.
I'm not even going to try to hit
what
those
I mean.
next notes.
Me either.
And the other question I have for you is, what was your favorite episode? What's the one you think people who are just jumping into the podcast now should really go back and listen to?
Shawna?
Okay, so we had so many awesome titles to go through. And if I was going to be suggesting the podcast to somebody else who's never ever listened to the podcast before, I would probably have to say either Bionic Commando or the Hot Shots Golf, because I felt like both of those were just really solid episodes. But for my personal, go listen to this, it's so fun. I just love it when we have the Mary Kate and Ashley games, because it's just, we get so silly during those.
Yeah, for me, my personal favorite probably actually went to the Dark Souls episode. We just had a really good guest for it. There was a whole lot to talk about with Souls. It might not be Dark Souls, Demon Souls predates that, but it's still such an important game in the gaming history. Getting to hear Nolan just kind of geek out a little bit about a series he loves, but still in a game he doesn't know. That was a good mix to me.
Yeah. My the one I would recommend is probably Number Munchers. Just because it's such a historic game that so many people know. I suppose not younger audience. But it that episode has so much personality from the hosts in it, where you just really get to see them interact with each other and joke and have fun. I really appreciated that episode.
Now,
those are the best episodes.
Now, of course, I did poll the community about what they favored the most, and, well, it's just a small section of the Discord population that was able to respond to it. I will say that people's favorite games, in terms of games they played, number one was Kirby's Dream Course, followed shortly by Advance Wars 2 and Guitar Hero 3. So all that enjoyment of GH3 seems to be a very common thing. I think anybody who's in kind of our loose age bracket will have some very fond memories of that. And as for a favorite episode, Guitar Hero 3 came on top. But the next one was a mixture of Kirby, Rez, probably because of the trance vibrator stuff, and BattleBots, believe it or not.
What?
And in terms of episodes, sometimes it's fun just to hear the guys go nuts over a bad game.
It's true. Arrow the
That is
Acrobat,
true.
everyone.
And
don't.
Speaking of going nuts over a game, our next game on the podcast is LSD Dream Emulator. And I don't know if either of the two of you have looked at it, but I asked the community whether they think the guys will give it NGP. Surprisingly, there was a fairly consistent expectation of no, but there is a portion of people who think Kenny will be the one who says yes, and a lot of people who think Nolan's a complete wild card on it.
Yeah, I see that.
Yeah.
I've put some time into it so far, and I've been having a lot of fun. I know the community hasn't. Dustin definitely isn't going to get along with this game. It's a really weird game. It is perhaps the only possible way we could end off the Summer of Weird. It's surrealist art. So if you're not into that, it might not be for you. And that's going to be a pretty small pool of people. And I don't think any of the hosts are those people.
Yeah, we'll have to see. This could be a very revealing episode about how the guys think about, games and art. But we'll have to see. That's for them to share with us next week. But
yes, and we'll be back to talk about it in 25 episodes or so.
Yep.
See you in February.
Yep.
And hey, if you liked what you've heard this episode, you should let us know on Discord. Go to the MGP website at discord.gg/newgameplus. Hey, by the way, you should also stop by the Patreon at patreon.com/NGP podcast. And if you haven't heard, there's new bonus content out there. There's the new expansion pack. After we mentioned the whole like community call-in and chat thing during the summer, during Couch Co-op, and the guys have decided, hey, we're just going to make that a monthly thing. We'll just hang out and take in calls from our patrons, and we'll have basically a live episode. So, like, if you want to hear that, if you want to participate in that, get on it. There's also, maybe, just maybe, a secret episode that snuck out there with Dustin talking about his review of Elden Ring.
It might have happened.
Maybe.
And hey, if you do it, you'll be joining the ranks of those of us who support the show financially. Like Alex, Alias, X, Marlian, Antonin, Arlene, Yuki, Ben, Craig, Dustin's 5 o'clock Shadow, myself, Guardian, Cade, Halix, Harold, Hey Brother, J. Robert, Jake, Joey, Jordan, Justin, Ken, Levi, Marcus, Maxima, Megatroid, Miss Muso, Not Enough Dog, Sajin, Shane, Sasser, Shawna, Snake Matic, Stephen Fox, Psycho Mantis, The Kentucky Kid, Thomas Tins, Turtle, Unbedavable, and Zion, all of our wonderful producers, and of course, our directors, Brojim, Scotty, Super Hypered, and Siegfried. I'd like to give a big thanks to Dan Willett for this vocal cast, Dylan for the video cast, and Dave for the monstrosities you create for YouTube thumbnails. Like that one where Dustin's photoshopped on both of the Mary-Kate and Ashley Olsen twins, which is absolutely terrifying. I hated it. Thank you.
We need a shirt.
Thank you. Speaking of shirts, if you have not heard, New Game Plus has a new merch lineup of 2 limited edition shirts, like the one I'm wearing right now, featuring Castlevania Simon Belmont?
Yep.
One of them. There's also a Portal shirt, and you can find those at, myshopify.com/newgameplus. If that link isn't right, it should be in the show notes or the description. Please check those out and pick some up. They are really nice, very high quality, and very comfortable.
And very limited.
And very somewhat. There were only 50, so I don't know how many are left.
Not that many. And if you want more of the guys, you probably know the drill. Follow the cast on Twitter or wherever you source your homegrown podcast. And hey, if you somehow want more of us, like the Retro Recap us, well, I've got a monthly podcast called What Am I Podcasting For? Where you can find on your podcast provider of choice. I'm playing through all of the Mega Man games. At the same time as this episode goes up, my monthly episode will be going live with the Mega Man Battle Network Wonder Swan game. And Klen, I know you've been up to some releases of your own recently, so why don't you tell us about that?
Yeah, I've been doing some music releases of my own. I had my debut album go out, Origins, back in April, shortly after the last recap, and I just released an Elden Ring EP last month, so please go check those out if you are so inclined. And also... my Hindsight podcast might be coming back.
Ooh.
So keep an eye out for that.
Well then, the regular hosts will be back next time to do their best not to take the low-hanging fruit of this game is named LSD because it was clearly taken while making it. Ha 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 ha. I dare them not to make that joke during the episode with LSD Dream Emulator. Until next Retro Recap, I've been Not Dustin.
I'm the Tower of Druaga.
Not Nolan.
And this has been New Game Plus.